Seen here with a discussion about Khorne in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires and the simple brilliance of this race, which actually has a lot more going for it than one might think on a surface level. See, Khorne is fairly easy to pick up. You have a very powerful melee line of units between Chaos Warriors, Chosen of Khorne, Bloodletters, and so on and so forth, but you actually do have a lot more units available to you as Khorne. You have different types of infantry that do have various purposes, like you can get Chosen of Khorne, which are really good line holders. You can get dual wield versions of Chosen of Khorne, which are really good at dealing with infantry blobs. Skull Reapers, more damage, less survivability. Halberds, good against any kind of cavalry that is trying to break through you. Chaos Knights of Khorne with lances. Things like Chaos Chariots of Khorne or Gore Beast Chariots, or what I like to call the motorcycle of Khorne. Regardless of how you build Khorne, what kind of army you're going for, it is difficult to get a bad roster. And that's one thing. On top of that, each Khorne army has bloodletting, which allows you to recruit things globally faster, also reduces the upkeep of your units. And that means you can just play as Khorne, go from battle to battle to battle, especially as every lord that you have does replenish their movement range after winning a battle or raising a settlement. You can just go from battle to battle to battle, defeating your foes along the way and increasing your bloodletting. And then on top of that, you also have the Skull Throne. Just get skulls, you get various benefits, pretty simple to understand. But here's where the twist comes in with Khorne campaigns, especially with Arbol. Because on one hand, yes, all of that is viable, but on the flip side, taking a settlement does require skulls. If you don't have 2,500 skulls, you're not going to be able to take over a settlement. So you can't just build a massive empire on your own, nor are you really incentivized to build a massive empire. That's kind of the great thing. Like, I feel that Creative Assembly has been trying to push this idea of a limited settlement campaign for quite a long time. Well, Khorne does it because, on one hand, taking over settlements means investing those strategic resources, but on the flip side, the settlements that you do have are going to be pretty powerful ones from a recruitment standpoint. Even a low-level settlement will give you things like Bloodletters and Chaos Warriors. So that is a great decision over there. It means that territory you take and hold is actually strategic. You're not just building willy-nilly, taking territory willy-nilly across the map and just taking over settlements all over. You have to decide where you're going to take it and how you're going to focus that specific settlement, in terms of unit recruitment especially. Now, of course, there is a bit of a downside over here in that you do have that demonic mortal split, so certain units are only available to demonic settlements, certain units and heroes are only available to mortal settlements. That's a bit of a downside. I think it goes contrary to what Khorne should be, which is like just a single province faction. Especially when you consider that mortal units are much better than demon units, with the exception of really skull cannons and a couple of other things as well, like, the Blood Shrine of Khorne, the motorcycle that I mentioned earlier. But still, it isn't too bad of a downside, and it does mean that you are incentivized to go out there and pick difficult fights against your opponents and set up your settlements in strategic locations. For instance, one of the best settlements to get early on in a Khorne campaign is actually Zarnagrund, which you certainly can, depend on the randomization of Arbol's challenges of Khorne. And these challenges are also great because with Arbol in particular, you're not just fighting random minor factions or even major factions that can't stand up to you. You get these kind of missions, and the more you do of these, you'll get a lot of money, you'll get a lot of skulls, and you'll get Khorne's favor. And Khorne's favor is really useful. The reason it is so very useful to get Khorne's favor is because with Khorne's favor, you do get things like blood toes, cults, campaign movement range, and so on and so forth. It is a ridiculously powerful campaign capability. But it does mean you have to pick and choose. And yes, you do have various venues of teleportation beyond just Arbel's challenges of Khorne. Every Khorne campaign has cults, and cults can be used to transport your faction leader. And as Arbel, you can just set up cults around the world. Of course, you can always use cultists if you're playing as Skulltaker, if you're playing as Scarbrand. That means that the campaigns that you end up playing as Khorne actually end up being far more dynamic than they might seem at first glance. Sure, you can just play a Khorne campaign very simply and very easily and just beat up everyone that stands in your path and just keep going from battle to battle. But is this world adventure and really having the entire sandbox be an actual sandbox in your campaign? And that's one of the reasons I think Khorne campaigns can work. Sure, the problem is that none of the AI factions can stand up to you properly, so you end up demolishing everyone in your path. But the mechanics, crucially, the mechanics of a campaign are all there to support both a very short campaign and also a very long campaign. You also then consider something that Creative Assembly did very well with Khorne campaigns, in that they give you the ability of recruiting all your hero types. There's only 3 of them, but recruiting all your hero types at tier 2, and then increasing their capacity at tier 3. So that means from a single province, you can end up having a significant number of heroes available in your campaign. Again, mortal, demonic split, and with respect to that, so you'll have less Blood Reapers. But even in this campaign, where I literally only have 1 proper province that increases capacity of heroes, we're looking at 2 Blood Reapers, 3 Exalted Heroes, 4 Cultists of Khorne. And then you add into that the research that gives you a bit of capacity early on, so things like War Leaders, Reaper of Ages, as an example, and you can even go for the favored one if you want to, though in this case I've gone with the Way of Wrath, which further benefits you by giving growth per region after winning a battle. So this is one of the great things about Khorne, is that you do get a lot of growth provided in all your provinces, provided you fight a lot of battles. And that is where things really do stand up, because having a faction with few provinces generally brings up the issue that you fall behind compared to others just because of the growth in settlements. But with Khorne, that's not really quite the case. Yes, they're not as fast as, say, Dark Elves, who just have instant construction on top of that, and you do have to construct those main settlement buildings and their regular buildings. But between the fact that your baseline army is awesome, and the stuff that you recruit mid-game and late-game is also awesome, things like, again, Chaos Knights, Chosen, Bloodthirsters, all that kind of stuff, you end up with a fairly varied army choice and army build. You might say it's just pure melee units, but it's the kind of role that those melee units do have. For instance, take Wrathmongers. They're really great units, but they're elite. They're kind of elite infantry units. They're not necessarily the most durable, but damn are they damn powerful in a campaign. And that's really where Khorne shines. Yes, it is a specific role, melee. So, but melee cavalry, melee chariots, single entities, melee infantry, it is all available in a Khorne campaign. And the interesting thing about the Khorne campaign is also the nuance you have from diplomacy that you can get. See, when you're playing a Khorne campaign, you actually have access to vassalization through diplomacy. So if you take specific settlements in a province, you can actually sell those settlements to factions and get diplomatic vassalization or alliances. For instance, in this specific campaign, I've got Boris Ursus, Archeon, Astrogoth. I'm probably going to get Grimgor soon enough. I've got Warzak fairly early on. And I've also got an alliance, not a vassalization, with Skulltaker, which hopefully will be turning into a confederation. So these kind of choices do end up mattering quite a bit in a campaign, because how you want to approach vassalization, which factions you want to vassalize, who you want to vassalize and when, does actually end up playing an important role, because, again, you can only hold so much territory. Of course, the way territory does end up working for a Khorne campaign is that when you raise a settlement to the ground, you prevent it from being taken over for a couple of turns, and then you have a chance, provided you do control at least one settlement in the province, you have a chance of taking over those settlements. They'll start at broken settlements, ruins, basically. You can rebuild them. But that means that as long as you're just taking one single territory in a province, you can actually rebuild the entire province just kind of naturally. And of course, the more corruption you have, or the more benefits you have in a campaign, for instance, with the Skull Throne, you can get Dissipation Domain, which gives you a chance of automatically colonizing ruins plus 5%. Combine that with the benefit you get from corruption, you end up in a pretty solid situation where you're free to reduce most elements in the province to ash and then just take over one. It can be a major settlement, it can be a minor settlement that you ultimately take over, but that decision is there. So you end up having a lot of flexibility on how you approach a campaign map. Sure, there are certain settlements you will want to take, Zarnagrund, for instance, just because it's a high-level settlement early on and that's a benefit, but you don't need to hold it even. Sure, again, there's landmarks, but you also have a lot of different choices in terms of how you beat a campaign. The only objective, for instance, in Arbol's campaign is beat up Azazel, and whatever on that entire subject is what I'd say on that. It's fairly easy, fairly simple to do, and you don't have to sweat over it. Again, you end up having a lot of that variety, and when I say variety, think of this. Because of the fact that you can visit so many places of the map and vassalize so many factions around the map, you actually end up with the ability of recruiting a lot of different allied troops. Hell, you can just help the High Elves in Ulthuan and get access to Skycutters if you want. You can get access to Dwarven Thunder Barges if you want. Sure, it's easier to do things with Chaos, but it's kind of hilarious to think that Khorne, a faction that should not necessarily be focused on diplomacy, does diplomacy in a much better way than the vast majority of other factions. It's the combination of movement range, how much of the campaign map you visit, as well as inherent campaign dynamics, including things like growth. And also beating up a faction's enemies does tend to gain you favor. And the fact that you end up having tons of money does also help you out as well. Now, mind you, having tons of money seems great, but bear in mind that given recruitment restrictions, you actually have to be smart about how you use it. You can't just recruit the highest end units, but again, limited recruitment capacity means that you can't just pop out armies infinitely without no restraint, because the restraint is ultimately going to be recruitment capacity. I think these are much better systems overall than how a lot of campaigns do deal with things, where they limit your economy or force you to play in a certain specific portion of the map. Certainly, other races, again, can't keep up with Khorne, but that's more so a representation of various issues of the game and different races than anything related to Khorne. My conclusion on this is that Khorne, if we're looking at a campaign that Creative Assembly tries to push the idea of fighting and limited settlements, limited control, and going all over the place, aka, for instance, Eldar and Space Marines, believe it or not, the inspiration that they should take is not something like the Changeling or Acelin or anything like that. It's more so something like Khorne, because surprisingly, the Khorne systems would work extremely well for those kind of campaigns, which, yeah, just goes to show how Creative Assembly, despite the issues Omens of Destruction ended up having as a DLC with Skulltaker and the other paid campaigns, the reworks of Ogres and Khorne in particular ended up paying off in a major way. That's all I had to say. Quistine signing out. Stay tuned for more.